Welcome back to my homebrew workshop of abject nightmares as I try to create new and fun ways to play 40k that push the boundaries of what some people might consider sane. Today I'm trying to cook up something truly magical with a new detachment that's paradoxically both broken and balanced at the same time. I've done this kind of thing before in the past, but that was for my Screaming Raven supplement. In that project I'm trying to create some homebrew rules that are somewhat balanced and within the design space of a normal thing you'd expect from 10th edition 40k. But this is the realm of homebrew, so I can do anything I want. Sure, creativity works well when there are some limits, but how far can I push that limit and still make something that is fun and interesting for both you and your opponent? It's all too easy to make something that's broken in 40k even without trying to create weird esoteric nonsense. Just ask GW. And making some ridiculous overpowered homebrew is spectacularly easy but also very boring. Anyone can create Chapter Master Henrius Cavillion, the God Emperor of Hyperdeath, and yeah, you'll have fun with your 150 point one-man army, but you'll end up doing so alone. 10th edition on the whole is relatively balanced. I'm not going to try and argue that, just it's okay. Most armies have a few cool skills and some cool units to play around with, and there are some combos which can be really powerful with the right list. For example, Centurions and Shadowmark Talon. For some reason, that's the only example I can think of off the top of my head. I also do like the way that detachments are designed, each one generally trying to focus on a particular set of units, but it can be a little bit dull. There are only a handful of truly innovative ideas, and that's fine to keep things easier for everyone to get their head around. Detachments are still relatively varied, even if they're using the same ideas. Those same ideas in different combinations do actually have quite a lot of variance. I want to try and make something for the Screaming Ravens that is truly unique, completely off the rails and utterly bonkers, but without it breaking the game and being an auto win for you because the rules are just so powerful. Yes, a stratagem that for one command point lets you take a sledgehammer to your opponent's army is certainly different and will help you win the game, but it'll also help you get a one-way ticket to your nearest A&E department. Am I the right person to attempt this task? God, no, absolutely not. But this is my fucking video and I'll do whatever the hell I want, and there's nothing you could do to stop me. You can yell at me in the comments about how much of a talentless psychopath I am and how deranged and unbalanced my ideas are, but by that point it's already too late. From my time as a dungeon master in D&D, I did a lot of my own world building and I created a lot of homebrew stuff. For magic items, I had the philosophy of high risk, high reward. So having a strong ability is great, but I like to create something that's really strong but requires either a hefty downside, a difficult or time-consuming requirement to use, or something that can be extremely punishing if used incorrectly. That makes the power potentially less desirable whilst also still being a very strong buff if used correctly. Now, I'm not saying my D&D designs were good. I once created a single boss encounter that lasted 9 hours over 3 sessions and trapped a player in a never-ending 30-foot loop for 2 hours. And I'm that prick that loves the Golden Deagle, mod control in Terrorist Town, and would use it immediately every chance I got for the 5% time I would intercale a trace to make them extremely salty. Also, D&D is a co-op game where as long as everyone is fairly equally powerful, you're not going to make anyone unhappy compared to a PvP game where giving one player the ability to rain hellfire on the other will make at least one person at the table reasonably unimpressed. But you can at least see how that kind of design philosophy might translate well into something like 40k. In any case, what we need to design needs to be fun for both players. That being said, I'm not going to hold myself to the standard archetypes or the way most armies abide by the rules. If knights are allowed to exist and skew things wildly compared to the rest of the factions, then hell, so am I. Now, this channel is bad at stuff, so I don't want to just show you my amazing masterpiece right off the bat. I've got to prove I'm worthy of the name, so I'll show you how the sausage is made. Maybe seeing the whole process will help you with your own creative endeavors. Or at the very least, it'll be very funny for you to see what kind of shit my brain comes up with. And the way that process works is a shotgun approach. Load up the box shot from my mind and fire it at the wall until something hits the target, and then try to refine that idea into something more tangible. If it doesn't work out, I move on fairly quickly. There are no bad ideas when coming up with something new. Okay, well, yes, there are. Some ideas are going to be objectively terrible, but the point I'm trying to make is that anything is worth considering. And if it's bad, we can at least have that idea stop taking up space in our brain to make room for other thoughts to fill that void. Creativity works best when you're allowed to fail fast. God, that sounded so fucking corporate. Ugh. I don't want to go as far as the off-cited and wished to be forgotten rules from Age of Sigmar 1st edition, even though I think the Skaven 2d6 rule is one of my favorite rules from any game of all time, alongside the top rope diving from Trench Crusade and the entirety of Gaslands. At the very least, it should be somewhat contained within the game, not some sort of weird improv comedy routine. I also want this to make sense for the Screaming Ravens lore-wise, or at least something I could justify being fluffy, but I won't invoke any specific Space Marine units so that this could be used in other armies with the right narrative flair. And that probably means there's a combo from an army I'm unfamiliar with that completely breaks the game, but that's your job to tell me about. Finally, don't look too deep into the wording to find loopholes. These are just ideas and I can't be asked to word them in a normal way that would try to avoid the rules as written shenanigan bullshit. So my first wild idea was this. The detachment rule, you only get one shot. Emphasizing the Screaming Ravens' sudden striking tactics and similar to the Ork Waaagh, but stupider. At the start of your command phase, you can choose to use this ability, and at the start of your next command phase, all Adeptus Astartes units can shoot and charge in turns in which they advance or fell back. Weapons equipped by units in your army gain lethal, sustained, and dev wounds. You can reroll hits and wounds, and models gain a 5 up feel no pain. All units also make a normal move of up to D6 inches, which for all those who tried to correct me in the last video is still 4 inches for Centurions. See this FAQ. At the start of your next command phase, any units that did not kill an enemy unit is battle shocked for the rest of the game, and any enemy units that are still alive gain the above buffs for the rest of the game. Yeah, okay, this is completely ridiculous, but you can see the idea behind it, right? Mostly I find it's better to get the idea down in whatever balance state, ponder over it to see if it's workable, and then do the balance if it is something you can actually work with. It's also good to explore other permutations of the idea, like maybe you could implement something which relates to the battle round you use it on. This idea works for a number of different armies. Night Lords, World Eaters, Orcs, and Drukhari are either fueled by violence or punished for their failings. Sisters are either fueled by righteous justice or have to show penance for not delivering the retribution of the God Emperor. And Necrons either show their galactic dominance or get caught up in bureaucratic squabbles about who stole their kill and what's that weird box that Trazyn has with a ridiculously strong magnetic field. My god, is that a Mad Case 2.0 from Templar Stronghold? It is! Incredible! You must have got that from TemplarStronghold.com and the Black Friday sale that is starting right now for amazing deals. If it's good enough for Trazyn to store his endless collection of legally acquired artifacts, then it's good enough for your models too. So doesn't matter how big they are, the adjustable tray and the power of will keep them safe, secure, and easier to transport than ever before. Go to tabletopstronghold.com right now to get yourself a carry case or a set of terrain made of the strongest MDF and get free shipping to the USA, Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand, and most of the EU. Click the links below to go right now. Go! It's a huge sale. Buy 8 of them. The savings. Think of the savings. Think of how attractive you'll be to potential partners with all of those magnets. Okay, so that idea definitely falls too much on the broken side. It's one of those ideas that sounds hilarious on paper, but there's a near impossibly fine margin for error, where the buffs you give will either mean you are guaranteed to table your opponents every game, or it's not strong enough where you're basically just gifting your enemy's army a second detachment rule. No point in trying to make this one balanced. The idea isn't really good enough, so let's move on. A new idea that keeps within the go turn theme is about changing the way you deploy. Ominous approaching cacophony. You do not deploy your army in the deployment set. This overrides any rules about deploying in your mission if people want to try that bullshit. In your command step, you can pick a table quarter, and every enemy unit in that table quarter must take a battle shock test in your opponent's turn. Anytime one of their units makes an advanced move, gets in range of an objective outside of their deployment zone, or starts an action, they must take a battle shock test. After 3 failed battle shock tests occur, the cacophony has thoroughly overwhelmed them, and at the start of your next movement phase, all units in your army are considered to have the deep shock ability and can be deployed accordingly in your reinforcement step. This would also fit G-Cid Occults, Hypercrypt Necrons, Tzeentchian Demons, Thousand Sons, Drukhari, and an Imperial Guard battalion that has accidentally entered the war and been spat out unceremoniously onto the battlefield ready to fix bayonets. Honestly, as a narrative custom mission, might be a fun one to expand on. As a playable detachment, far too much. I like this one as a way of emphasizing one army trying to set positions, knowing an attack will happen, being skittish at the bizarre noises circulating around them, and when enough of the enemy has the jitters, getting pounced upon and ripped to shreds. But the sniff test, as it were, for these ideas is that if I had to play against it at a tournament, would I be happy? And the answer is probably not. It feels far too heavily RNG based and too much of a departure from what you'd expect when learning and improving a game like 40k. So this one definitely fails as a detachment, but it's not a failed idea as it could be worked into a custom mission. But, you know, I do kind of like the idea of ramping battle shocks. It's not completely new, but maybe there's a way to combine the two ideas we've had so far into something usable. How about Ominous Approaching Cacophony version 2, because I couldn't think of a new name. Enemy units within 12 inches of units in your army are -1 to battle shock tests. At the start of each battle round, set your enemy's battle shock count to 0. Each time a unit in your opponent's army fails a battle shock test, increase this number by 1. At the end of the battle round, note the value of that battle shock count before it gets reset. At the start of the battle round, you gain the buffs based on that battle shocked units count. All bonuses on the table are cumulative. If you start with the max score, you also get to move all your units a normal move of up to D6. From battle round 3 onwards, if you reach the end of a battle round with 0 on your count, and there is at least 1 enemy unit wholly outside their deployment zone, your opponent has weathered your assault and your momentum is halted. You no longer gain any benefits from your detachment rule, and your opponent gains maximum stacks at the start of the next command phase for the rest of the game. Essentially, it's a game of edging your opponent. That isn't the best way of wording that. It's a game of keeping your opponent's army on edge, ensuring that you're getting battle shocks off constantly to keep that momentum going each round. The additional caveat of the score being 0 and there being enemies outside of their deployment zone means your opponent can't just hide and force you to fail if they only throw a handful of units forward at a time. They need something to be in the fray, otherwise they're just cowardly cowering in the corner, and that shouldn't be a viable counter here. This is also a nice base to work around for enhancements and stratagems. You need things that are going to force battle checks to happen outside of the normal battle shock step, and the way you interpret battle shock can be different depending on the faction. For or Screaming Ravens isn't necessarily frightening your opponents, but think of it more as though the overwhelming audio tricks and inability to point out where those noises are coming from has put the enemy on the back foot and confused them. Perfect prey to be descended upon. But this is starting to feel a little bit too normal. It's got a bit of Chaos Knights and a smidge of Emperor's Children coterie of the conceited. Apart from flipping the buff if you failed the Battleshock kind of thing, this isn't something you wouldn't be surprised to see in a Grotmus detachment. I think it might actually be workable into something legitimate, but it doesn't really fit too much into the absurdly broken nature of what I want to achieve here. I think that pathway is well explored. Let's get a new direction. It's time to reload the idea cannon with the finest mine shots. Close our eyes and pull the trigger as fast as humanly possible. Changing or moving deployment zones? Probably too messy. Being able to fight outside of the map? Far too abusable, and with how close tables get at tournaments, probably impossible to do practically. Fakery, mimicry, kind of bluffing stuff. That could be something. Let's see. Playing around with misdirection and visual trickery is something I really like, and I don't see explored much because it's quite a difficult thing to pull off in a way that makes sense and can be tracked without giving away your nefarious schemes. The Deceptors detachment for Chaos Space Marines explores this a little bit. I really like the idea of Soul Link. Maybe it would be even cooler if you could use it on your opponent's units as well. But this is giving me an idea around giving you a chance to try and bluff your way to victory by making your opponent second guess your game plan and whether they should even be shooting your units at all. Hologrammatic simulacrums. Look, alright, these are detachments in 40k. They have to have some completely over-the-top and fancy-sounding name. The only way this could be even more Games Workshop is to add the word task force at the end. Anyway, as I was saying, hologrammatic simulacrum task force. Before the declare formation step, roll a d6 that the result is hidden from your opponent, but that they can see you actually roll the die. Take a picture of the die in some way or note down the result without being a cheating prick about it. Just don't be a dickhead, all right? Just roll a dice and note down the result without cheating. This result is your hologrammatic simulacrum count. This count represents the number of units that you can designate as fakes. So let's just call them fakes, all right? Write down a list of which units you are designating as fakes. Fakes are units in your army that deploy as normal, but are not actually there, but decoys that will distract your opponent whilst you sneak into your real position. Fakes cannot perform actions, shoot, charge, fight, use attachment abilities, and have OC 0, but they can move and advance as normal. They also roll saves as normal. If a fake unit takes any damage, immediately remove it from the table. Then place that unit as the real original unit anywhere on the board that is over 9 inches away from any other enemy units. Enemy units that destroy a fake are considered bamboozled, and until the end of your next turn, units in your army gain +1 AP against them. The big question for this one is, will it ever actually work, or will your opponent just end up shooting anything because not shooting a fake doesn't really have any downsides? Getting +1 AP against them isn't really that bad, and is being able to remove anywhere really that much of an issue if you can screen for it? Probably not. There needs to be some sort of downside that at least gives your opponent something to think about before shooting what could be a clone. I think there's something here, but it definitely needs more time. Right now, it's a bit too undercooked, and there are too many weird interactions to consider. So, we need to go back to the drawing board for some more ideas. Opponent movement manipulation. Fun, but will probably cause arguments, and touching other people's models is generally frowned upon. The Gargant Suplex from Age of Sigmar is probably the best thing you're going to have in this section because it's quite easy to do and it's only one model moving another. Trying to make fortifications a thing. No, not even I'm that crazy to try and make handful bunkers viable. Literal 4D chess. Designing something that somehow manipulates time, like, I don't know, delaying damage, areas of slow and fast speed. This is another custom mission thing, isn't it? Also, if you ever want to do any sort of rewinding time mechanic, you basically have to make markers for every single movement so you can rewind back to where they were. Does anyone remember that game Frozen Synapse? Probably not, seeing as that game came out 14 years ago. Jesus fucking Christ. Keyword manipulation. Total carnage sounds fun, but would be completely unwieldy. Go back to 9th edition for some reason. Make a normal detachment, but you never gain command points. Said you just start with 15 from the beginning of the game. Terrible idea. How about a detachment rule? Fucking why not? Ranged weapons equipped by your models now have the range melee, and melee weapons now have the range of 18 inches and can be used outside of engagement range. Melee ballistas are finally justified. Detachment rule. The game becomes Sabutio. I don't know. I tried, all right? This shit is hard. I wanted to make something completely absurd, but nothing I really came up with holds together as a cohesive detachment that you'd actually want to see in the game. I have a detachment rule idea quite well, but it's hard to build the rest of the stuff around that because the detachment rule is doing so much heavy lifting. Scintillating Legion is a good case study here. 3 of the 4 enhancements don't interact with the detachment rule at all, and apart from Flickering Reality, which is awesome, the others are fairly standard and not particularly novel. but they're all decently designed because they still use that core mechanic. That makes it a fun and distinct detachment without twisting the rules so much it becomes a complete mess. My ideas could be made so they weren't completely broken, but at the end of the day, they're more like fun mission ideas. But that's what creativity and designing is like sometimes. I didn't get what I want, but I did come up with some cool stuff, and I had a lot of fun doing it, and I learned a little bit as well, and I hope you had fun coming on this journey with me, and maybe you're inspired to create your own nonsense. I'd like to see GW, with their actual designers and their real experience, explore more fun mechanics like this. I liked the Grotma's detachments despite the many repeated rules with different wrappings. Some of the best detachments they've ever made came out of it, like Reaper's Wager. I like the idea of there being some sort of Legends detachment thing. Detachments that are not competitive mission pack compliant, but detachments for people to try, and maybe with a bit of tweaking and playtesting, ones that may become actually usable anywhere to spice the game up a bit. It'd be good to have a place to test new content without the spectre of competitive integrity hanging over there. And final lesson, sometimes creativity is going through all that bullshit and just getting a massive surge of inspiration out of fucking nowhere. Prototype enhanceable non-physical integrated system. Once per battle in your shooting or fight phase, each unit in your army can supercharge their weapons. Weapons equipped by models in that unit gain lethals, sustained or devastating wounds, +1 ballistic or weapon skill, depending on if you're doing it in melee or ranged, and hazardous. You can then change your weapon's attacks, strength, AP, and damage by taking -1 to one stat and giving +1 to another. A stat cannot go below 1. Each weapon of the same name in a unit must be changed the same way. I could have made it so each weapon could be changed individually, but then at that point you're going to spend most of your shooting phase rewriting individual weapons, and that's horrendous. Stats with variants like D3 or D6 cannot be changed, but any of the +X's, like las cannon damage being D6 +1, can be changed. So it could go from D6 +1 to D6 +5 or just D6. When rolling the D6 for the hazardous check, the maximum number that will result in a fail is 6 minus the number of models you destroyed, up to 5. So a 1 will always fail. Thematically, this works for a lot of factions. The Screaming Ravens can use it if you imagine changing the weapon stats akin to pretending to be holding a las cannon, but actually it's a minigun. Tau and Votan are obviously justifiable as new experimental tech, but this also works for 1,000 Suns with magic. For Custodes or Adeptus Sororitas, it could be blessings from the Emperor. For Orcs, they're just buggering about and gaffer taping guns together. Vashtorian engineering could be a justification, or just Tyranids adapting on the fly during a battle. For the rest of the detachment, I've designed it around the idea of having basically no defensives whatsoever. It's a glass cannon detachment. For enhancements, I've made it so most of them don't affect the entire unit and instead buff up one thing to build some wacky characters that do damage themselves instead of handing out buffs that would make a big unit completely unreasonable in certain situations. So for enhancements, you could have destabilizing power, where you pick a weapon at the start of the game and stats on that weapon are doubled when you use prototype enhancement non-physical integrated system. But it also gains the one-shot keyword. Penetrating potential, enemy models killed by prototype enhanceable non-physical integrated system weapons from the bearer deal D3 mortal wounds to units around them, and this damage can trigger this effect again. Accelerating thrust drive, when using prototype enhanceable non-physical integrated system, weapons in the bearer's unit also gain the assault keyword, so a little bit of advance and shoot there. And primed to explode, the bearer has deadly demise D6 and auto explodes on death. For stratagems, it's either souping up the power at the cost of being more likely to self-detonate, or it's powerful buffs that require a unit to still have access to prototype enhanceable non-physical integrated system. Hold back and reposition. Units can auto advance 6 inches and declare a charge in that turn, but cannot use prototype enhanceable non-physical integrated system till the start of your next command phase. Usable only on units that haven't already used prototype enhanceable non-physical integrated system. Equal and opposite reaction. A unit is eligible to shoot in a turn which it fell back, but it must activate prototype enhanceable non-physical integrated system. I wanted to be fancy and put fortune favors the bold in Latin because I googled it, but now I realize I don't know how to pronounce it. I did a GCSE in Latin, didn't go well. Audentis Fortuna Iovat. Maybe. The unit can use prototype enhanceable non-physical integrated system again, but the hazardous test is rolled with a -2. Each unit in your army can only be targeted once per battle with this stratagem. Overwhelming pressure. Prototype enhanceable non-physical integrated system crits hits on 5+, but the range is halved if using the shooting phase, or hazardous check is -2 if in melee. Devastating release. Weapons gain lethals, sustained, and devastating wounds, but makes the hazardous check at -2. And finally, recuperation. One unit that has not used prototype enhanceable non-physical integrated system, or 2 units that have, can up you downing at the end of the opponent's fight phase. Look, every detachment has up and downing, alright? I couldn't help myself. The elephant in the room for this one is definitely the adjusting weapon stats. I'm sure you all have immediately written comments about your favorite unit, and your unit would definitely break the game if it had access to this. I mean, Stompers would have a fucking field day. Jesus. But I think this idea has some real potential because of the number of levers you can pull to balance it, and making it a purely offensive detachment where you're likely to destroy yourself, especially against vehicles, sounds really fun to me. Again, this is a draft idea and a daft idea, and honestly, I can 100% see a path where trying to balance this becomes too much of a pain because of how exploitable it is. I'm sure despite my best efforts, the adjustable weapon stat rule would just have to change to something more consistent. Or potentially the alternative is you just remove the part about having the hazardous check could be less dangerous the more models you destroy, and just have it so if you use it, you will take hazardous damage. That way, at the very least, the Rogue can turbo fuck you with its array of weapons retooled for annihilation, but it'll take 18 mortal wounds for its troubles. Finally, a fitting punishment for a single tank having such an obscene number of weapons available. I say, again, fuck the Rogue. Let me know what you think and any ideas you have, and as always, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoy this, go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff. Support me further by buying my merch or becoming a member or patron like all of these impressive innovators. I've got to go now. I tried coming up with a detachment that gets buffs if you set your models on fire, and there's a slight risk of something bad setting on fire.